I really apologize. I find it unbelievable that my son would commit such a crime. My mother-in-law paid me an unexpected visit while my husband was away on business. She apologized to me for being surprised and said there were multiple photos of the scene of my husband's affair. She appeared shocked. After realizing what was happening, I defended it to my mother-in-law. I am Isabella, and I am 30 years old. I have been married to my husband James for 3 years. I met him 5 years ago. It all started when he approached me when I was 25 years old, while I was drinking with my friends at my favorite bar. It wasn't like I hadn't been approached by guys before when I was out with friends or went shopping by myself. Usually, I would just brush them off as playful approaches. But I'm sorry, this is a pickup, but would you like to have a drink with us? We all started drinking together, and James and I hit it off right away because we had similar senses of humor. After James asked me out on a formal basis, our friendship turned into a romantic relationship, and we were married 2 years later. James approached me with a bright red face, and I couldn't help but laugh. We've been dating for almost 3 years, and we still haven't been blessed with children. I get a little depressed whenever I get the texts or postcards which announce their pregnancy from friends who got married around the same time as me, but children are a wonderful thing. I found out that James goes on business trips frequently while we were dating, and he would be away from the city at least once a month. The duration of his trips varied. Sometimes he would return in 2 days, while on other occasions, he would be gone for a week or more when there was trouble at work. I had another strong source of support besides James, and that was his mother, Emma, my mother-in-law. I had come to this city when I started university, got a job here, and got married. Since my parents, who lived in a place where I have to take an airplane to get to, still worked full-time, we were all too busy, and I couldn't easily make a trip back home. Therefore, even though I wanted to discuss our childlessness with them, I couldn't bring myself to do it over texts or phone calls, as I feared I would unnecessarily worry them. On the other hand, James' family lived nearby, just a short walk from our current apartment. His parents were both very gentle and kind-hearted people who treated me exceptionally well. I had always dreamt of getting along with my in-laws. When James got married, my mother-in-law, in particular, treated me as if I were her own daughter. Whenever James and I had minor disagreements or conflicts, she would lend her ear and give me advice. And thanks to her, we had reconciled more than a few times. I often wondered if the issues between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law I heard about in the world were even real. My mother-in-law and I went out and had meals together when I had days off from work. When James was away on a business trip, I would have dinner with my in-laws as they invited me and sometimes even stay overnight. I even thought that maybe I, a daughter-in-law, spent more time having fun with my in-laws than their son. I was spending my days being supported by my in-laws like that. But James was still as busy as ever. Recently, he has been traveling around more than ever before due to a new client. With James' excessive busyness and frequent absences, our mutual friend even teased us from time to time. "Isn't he working a bit too much? Is everything legitimate and not suspicious?" she would say. But James would always bring back local souvenirs from his business trips for my in-laws and me. So, I didn't think he was lying. But still, it is true that something has been bugging me more and more about James' behavior lately. Actually, a woman I had never met in person suddenly started following me on Instagram recently. At first, I thought she might be randomly selecting people and following, hoping they would follow her back so that she can boost her follower count. But when I checked her Instagram, she didn't seem to be seeking self-validation or promoting anything. However, when I paid close attention to her pictures, I noticed that many of her photos had cryptic tags. The men in the photos, often captured from behind or showing only parts of their bodies, somewhat resembled James. Furthermore, the dates of her posts seemed to align with James's business trips when he was away from home. Could this be a declaration of war? With that thought in mind, I decided to investigate further just to be sure. I started by scrolling back through her posts on Instagram and found that the suggestive photos had started appearing about 6 months ago. I also discovered a Twitter account with the same name and profile picture as her Instagram. According to the Twitter account, she appeared to be in her early 20s. And I shouldn't say like this, but she seemed to be a somewhat thoughtless person. After I wondered what to do for a little while, I concluded that it was best to get to the bottom of this. And I decided to hire a professional. After a while, I received a report from the detective. It turned out that my suspicions were correct. James had indeed been having an affair with the woman on Instagram. I'm going on another business trip tomorrow, so look forward to some souvenirs. Even though I had prepared myself to some extent, when I saw the evidence of his infidelity in front of my eyes, I was still shocked. If we were just dating, breaking up would be a relatively straightforward solution. However, since we are married, there are many troublesome legal procedures and financial issues to deal with. So, we can't really end the relationship right then and there. Handing him divorce papers wouldn't solve everything either. Besides, divorcing James would mean severing ties with my in-laws as well. A week had passed since I received the detective's report, but I still couldn't decide on what to do. On the other hand, James, unaware of my feelings, went on a business trip as usual. He might be meeting his affair partner again, using a business trip as an excuse. When I thought that, the tears welled up because I was angry and also frustrated. As I sat on the couch in the living room, I was idly looking at the report when the intercom rang unexpectedly. Who could it be? Thinking that, I looked at the monitor and saw my mother-in-law standing there. While it was true that our houses were within walking distance, I couldn't recall a time when she had come to our house unannounced this late at night, which was past 9 o'clock. I quickly brought her inside, but her usual cheerful demeanor was absent, and she had an unusually solemn expression with a pale complexion. Seeing my mother-in-law like this for the first time, I sensed that something serious was afoot. I hurriedly seated her on the couch and asked what had happened. My mother-in-law exclaimed, "I'm so sorry, it seems like James is behaving like the lowest of the low." When I heard her words, I was surprised that my mother-in-law also knew about James's infidelity. However, James would never voluntarily confess his affair to his parents, so I wondered how they found out. Are you talking about James's affair?" I told my mother-in-law I actually found it out recently as well, and she looked at me, obviously shocked that I knew. I then told her about the Instagram where I had found James's affair partner, and I showed her the pictures of James's partner on my phone, and while she stared at the screen, she looked up at me and said, No, this isn't the girl I'm talking about." "Oh my goodness, how many people is he seeing?" she exclaimed. She went on to explain in a shaky voice, with a flushed face, that she had become suspicious about 2 weeks ago when she went out to dinner with a friend. The restaurant, with its pleasant atmosphere, is often used for business meetings during lunch hours, so she initially assumed that the woman whom James was with was a work-related acquaintance. She discreetly observed James and the woman since her table was hidden from James's table, as it was behind a pillar, and she began to notice their strange behavior. My mother-in-law became suspicious as she saw James and the woman exchange lingering glances and casually hold hands while eating across from each other. She told her friend what was happening, and when they secretly followed James and the woman, to their surprise, James and the woman went into a hotel district in broad daylight. I was in shock and disbelief, my mother-in-law continued, but my friend managed to take some photos at the spur of the moment. The woman in the photo she showed me indeed appeared to be a different person from the one on Instagram. We could only see her back in the picture, but she was wearing a suit and had black hair, and she looked neat and tidy. In contrast, the woman on Instagram had blonde hair and dressed in a flashy fashion. I was indeed stunned as I was looking at the photos of the two women and comparing them with each other. My mother-in-law told me that she had been agonizing over whether to tell me about James's affair or not for the last 6 months. "I wanted to confront James about it first, but I haven't been able to reach him at all," she said. "But that may not be too surprising. I haven't called him yet. I've only spoken to him via texts because I didn't want to bother him while he was away on business." According to what my mother-in-law told me, though, I believe James is attempting to limit the calls he takes during his business trip to those from the company. Because I didn't want to interfere with his work while he was away, I may have encouraged James to have an affair. My mother-in-law informed me, though, that I felt foolish rather than irritated or Furious. I felt strangely peaceful, but my mother-in-law was nervous and worried about me. Maybe deep inside, after seeing what felt like that woman's Instagram declaration of war, I had already mentally prepared myself for this. My mother-in-law squeezed my hand when I told her. "I understand. Let's do what makes you happy, Isabella," she replied. 2 days following my mother-in-law's unannounced arrival, James made his scheduled return from his business trip. But when he got to the living room and saw his parents present, he started acting very agitated. He must have detected something when both of his parents were unhappy and not at all smiling. "Huh? Why are you guys here? Did something happen?" Sitting still, my father-in-law fixed his gaze on James. "Enough questions, just sit down," he replied, and James, appearing scared, sat down in the chair across from his parents. I put a printed copy of the pictures my mother-in-law's acquaintance had shot at the location of James's affair on the table in front of him at that precise moment. James froze in position, focused on the pictures immediately. With my arms crossed, I questioned him icily. "This man, he's you, isn't he? So who is this woman, can you explain?" James began offering explanations when he stated, "This isn't what it looks like. I just had lunch with a coworker, and she drank too much wine, so I had to take care of her. But first of all, it seems strange to have wine with a coworker at lunch, and even if she gets intoxicated, there's absolutely no reason to check into a hotel." I pretended to have accepted his explanation for the moment, as if I thought he was off the hook, while I was mentally pointing it out. James smirked and added, "Come on, you all came here for such a misunderstanding." It was the look on his face that infuriated me. "Oh, really? But there are other women, right? If you think you haven't been caught, you are in for a surprise," I replied. "I might reconsider my stance if you tell me the truth," I said. James claimed to be innocent at first, saying, "What do you mean by if you think you haven't been caught and other women?" But as my in-laws and I kept staring at him gravely and sternly, he started to become hot under the collar. James eventually muttered, "I'm sorry." After that, he revealed everything. He acknowledged that the woman in the pictures was, in fact, a coworker and that they had been having an improper relationship for a while. Additionally, he disclosed that he shared a similar bond with other women. But as my mother-in-law and I listened to him in quiet, a large question crossed our minds. I had been involved in an inappropriate relationship with James for some time, he also admitted, including with a temp worker in a different department after a night of drinking. That's because, you see, the woman I'd earlier questioned James about was the same one who had declared war on Instagram. Her profile suggests that she is a woman he met when traveling for work, as he doesn't think she would work for the same organization. Furthermore, there shouldn't be any confusion because that is stated explicitly in the professional report. So when I showed James the printout of the Instagram profile and questioned, "Then who is this person if you say that she works at the same company as you? It doesn't make sense, does it?" He became pale and cried. He began to get anxious and was attempting to think of a reason. James's body trembled and stiffened at the sound of my father-in-law's apparent exhaustion. "What are you saying? I can't even hear you. Speak up if you're a man." But he eventually began to explain everything uncomfortably. He said that he had affairs with 4 different women, including those with whom he was merely intimately involved. 2 of them, including the Instagram user he met while traveling for work, appear to be close friends. In addition, he has been dating one of the women for a year and the other on Instagram for 6 months. When I heard this, I gave up. I was taken aback not just by the fact that he had dated several women, but also by the length of time these relationships had lasted. James did, however, make an effort to win forgiveness. With a hurried apology, "I'm so sorry. I am remorseful and will never do something like this again," but what rubbish. After all that, do you believe you'll be forgiven? Never, my father-in-law was enraged. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law sat there sobbing uncontrollably. It was truly a nightmarish scene. Once my mother-in-law had somewhat composed herself, I asked James for the reasons behind his affairs. I thought that perhaps I might have been at fault in some way, but he replied, "I have no complaints about you." He begged for forgiveness again, saying, "It's just that I got carried away by the situation." But I could not forgive him. I told him, "I'm really sorry. I don't need a husband who betrays his wife after he gets married just because he got carried away. Pardon me, please." He clutched to her, saying, "The only person I love is you." But who would believe such things now? I faced my in-laws, who remained silent. I apologized to them initially and informed them that I was divorcing him. James's complexion darkened even more upon hearing my statement. "Hold on, I'll break up with my lovers." My mother-in-law sighed and reluctantly accepted my decision, though she was sincerely sad. After hearing her remarks, I turned to face James. "How can I just go on like nothing happened when you've insulted me to that extent?" he cried, but we all completely disregarded him. I firmly stated, "I'm going to demand pay from you and your partners." "Pay? How is that related to those girls?" James shouted. However, at least the woman on Instagram, maybe not the other women, knew that James was married, and she tried to pick a fight with me, his wife, since she engaged in an inappropriate relationship with a married man. I need her to think on her conduct. James, with tears flowing down his face, turned to his parents for support, saying, "The same goes for the other women if they knew that he was married." But my mother-in-law responded, "We are fully on Isabella's side. We don't even consider you our son anymore, and you'll have to deal with the consequences." James collapsed to his knees upon hearing this. In the following days, with the help of the lawyer my in-laws recommended, I started the divorce procedure. According to the lawyer, the woman on Instagram was indeed aware of my existence as James's wife, and she seemed to have tried to pick a fight with me just so that she can one-up me. Moreover, she had believed it when James said, "Let's get married," so she was quite shocked. As for the two co-workers at James' company, it is true that they only slept with him a couple of times, but at this point, it doesn't matter how many times. They are completely guilty. I decided to claim compensation from the woman on Instagram and the two co-workers after I consulted with the lawyer. As for the other woman, I just asked the lawyer to advise her to demand compensation from James if she didn't know that he was married and she was deceived. Meanwhile, the fact of his affair came to light when the lawyer contacted James' company. He was fired for causing a fuss by having an affair on a business trip and also for having inappropriate relations with two women in the company. The two co-workers faced pay cuts, but one of them resigned right away. The other temporary employee left the company when her contract expired. Furthermore, James is in a dire situation now, as the woman who didn't know that James was married told him that she is going to sue him for marriage fraud. Although he texted his parents and made desperate messages asking for help, we ignored the texts after reading them and eventually blocked him. So we don't know what happened to him after that. As for me, the divorce was finalized successfully, and I received a fair amount of compensation thanks to my lawyer. I found a new job, and I'm enjoying peaceful time with my in-laws on the weekends, just like before.